지금 100몇 살 어머니들이 다 돌아가셨다 아닙니까? 그때 그 바다 고기가 흔하게네. 고기 삶아가지고 짱을 삶아가지고 이제 시락국 끓여가 막걸리하고 그 어른들 그때 배고픈 시절에 간단하게 그래 잡수평기 연자는 별미가 됐어.
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. There's a massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, September 9th, here in South Korea. A chartered flight is scheduled to bring home the South Korean workers detained by U.S. federal agents, and Foreign Minister Jong-un is in the U.S. to ensure a constructive resolution to the recent event. And President Lee Jae-myung calls for bold measures to stem inflation, stressing that stabilizing grocery prices is essential for people's livelihoods and the broader economy. Meanwhile, across the border, North Korea reportedly successfully conducts its final test of a new solid fuel engine that paves the path for the regime to test its newest intercontinental ballistic missile. We start with the latest regarding the fate of the South Korean workers detained by U.S. federal agents last week. The government here is seeking a swift return of these workers on a chartered flight within this week. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young reports.
Around 300 South Koreans detained in the United States are expected to board a chartered flight home within the next day. A foreign ministry official told reporters on Tuesday that a chartered plane is being arranged to bring back Korean nationals from Georgia after they were arrested en masse last Thursday at a Hyundai LG battery plant. The government is aiming for a departure on Wednesday local time and is currently coordinating the details with business officials and the airline involved. According to sources in the aviation sector, a Korean Air aircraft is expected to depart Atlanta late in the afternoon and arrive at Korea's Incheon airport late on Thursday Korea time. The released Koreans will first be transported from the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Detention Center in southern Georgia and travel some 428 kilometers to catch their charter flight. After a weekend of negotiations, Seoul said Monday it secured the early release and return of detainees through their voluntary departure. To ensure their smooth release, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun arrived in Washington, D.C. on Monday local time with a rapid response team from Seoul. Cho will likely meet with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other senior Trump administration officials on Tuesday. He's expected to press Washington to ensure that the returning workers will not face penalties such as bans on re-entry to the US. The minister has also emphasized he will address broader visa issues affecting Korean firms investing in America. This could include creating a new professional visa category for Korean nationals, so companies can dispatch essential staff to the US more smoothly. Cho is also expected to stress that Korean firms have already made large-scale investments in the US and that future projects depend on stable conditions. The raid last week by US immigration authorities took place at a factory that's part of Hyundai's $12.6 billion investment in Georgia, known to be the largest economic development project in the state's history. President Lee Jae-myung at a cabinet meeting on Tuesday also pushed for a systematic solution.
한미 양국의 동반 발전을 위한 우리 국민과 기업의 활동에 부당한 침해가 가해지는 일이 다시는 재발하지 않기를 바랍니다. 우리 정부는 유사한 사례가 반복되지 않도록 미국과의 긴밀한 협의를 통해 합리적 제도 개선을 신속하게 추진해 나가겠습니다.
In light of the recent arrests, Korean firms have raised concerns over their future business in America, while public sentiment has also been unsettled. A survey by Realmeter conducted this week found 6 in 10 Koreans find the mass arrests at the US plant disappointing and excessive.
Time is of the essence. How quickly and effectively this crisis is resolved between the two allied nations could directly influence Korean public sentiment, not to mention the future of Korean investments in the United States. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
And President Lee Jae-myung has called for bold measures to stem inflation. Presiding over a cabinet meeting earlier on this Tuesday, he stressed the importance of stabilizing grocery prices for people's livelihoods and the broader economy. Do take a listen.
복잡한 유통 구조 등 여러 요인 때문에 우리의 식료품 물가는 OECD 평균보다 무려 50% 가까이 높다고 합니다. 같은 고물가라도 그 충격은 취약계층에게 더 클 수밖에 없고 이는 양극화와 불평등을 심화시키게 됩니다. 경제 전체의 활력도 당연히 저하됩니다.
In response, related ministers outlined potential measures such as offering discounts on popular items ahead of next month's Chuseok holiday and streamlining fruit and vegetable distribution systems. In his first National Assembly address as the leader of the Democratic Party, Chung Chung-lee declared that rooting out insurrection is not political retaliation, but rather a defining issue of the times. He urged the opposition People Power Party to apologize to the nation for the martial law declaration and to sever all ties with insurrectionary forces. Chung also reaffirmed his party's intention to pursue 3 key reforms targeting the judiciary, prosecution and media, while pledging the DP's full support of the Lee Jae-myung administration's growth-centered economic policies. In their latest monthly assessment of the South Korean economy, analysts at a state-run think tank believe the slowdown is showing signs, subtle signs that is, of improvement. Our correspondent Park Jun-an covers their thoughts and more.
South Korea's economy is experiencing a slight easing of its slowdown, primarily driven by consumer spending, despite persistent weaknesses in construction investment and prevalent global trade risks. This is according to the monthly report released Tuesday by the state-run think tank, the Korea Development Institute, analyzing the nation's economy. Oil industry production rose 1.9% in July from a year earlier. However, despite the increase, construction remained weak, and manufacturing capacity utilization stayed low, resulting in a 14.2% drop from the same period last year. Industrial production in July, which includes mining and manufacturing, rose 5% year-on-year. Notably, semiconductor output jumped 20.5%, while motor vehicles and electronic parts also posted gains from a year earlier. Exports to the U.S. in August underperformed as they declined by 8.1% year-on-year. Despite strong semiconductor shipments, exports were dragged down by motor vehicles and parts and steel, which are subject to high tariffs.
Export fluctuations depend on whether companies choose to raise prices to offset tariffs, but strategies have not yet been finalized. And in sectors like automobiles, tariffs have been agreed to be lowered but are not yet in effect. So, considerable uncertainty still remains.
In the meantime, the KDI pointed to signs of improved stability in the credit market and domestic consumption. Consumer sentiment, which is considered optimistic if it's over 100, remained strong at 111.4 for August, supported by falling market interest rates and the government stimulus, including a second round of supplementary budget and distribution of livelihood recovery consumption coupons. Park Junan, Arirang News.
North Korea has reportedly successfully conducted its final test of a new solid-fuel engine that effectively paves the path for the regime to test its newest intercontinental ballistic missile. Our Kim Do-yeon has details.
North Korea, with leader Kim Jong-un's oversight, has conducted the final ground test for a new high-thrust solid-fuel engine for its Hwasong-20 ICBM. That's according to the North Korean Central News Agency on Tuesday. The report claimed the test was successful and quoted Kim as saying it heralds a momentous change for his nuclear forces. It also confirmed this was the 9th and final test in the engine's development, including details such as a maximum thrust of 1971 kilonewtons and that the carbon fiber makes the engine lighter and more efficient. The news also comes a week after Kim inspected the motor's development ahead of his trip to China. An official at Seoul's Unification Ministry noted that the specific details were carried by the international-facing KCNA, but not the domestic-facing Rodong-Sinmun newspaper, suggesting the message is intended for an external audience. Analysts expect the new intercontinental ballistic missile to be unveiled soon.
I believe they will reveal the actual missile on the 80th Party Foundation anniversary and likely conduct a test launch before the year's end to mark the completion of the 5-year plan, and as a celebratory launch for next year's 9th Party Congress.
The test timing, just after leader Kim Jong-un's return from China, is seen by analysts as a key part of Pyongyang's strategic messaging, especially as the KCNA also reported that Kim visited the construction site of a major hospital in North Korea and has stressed that building provincial hospitals is a top priority, calling it a vital project to provide people outside Pyongyang with advanced medical services.
While maintaining close ties with China and Russia, we must see the context here is to emphasize that it is an independent nation, not subordinate to these great powers, through its own nuclear capabilities. Therefore, conducting an advanced weapons test like this right after the China visit, and also giving guidance on a hospital construction, is an intention to show he is a tireless leader, working hard for both military and civil affairs.
Analysts also said this could be a strategic move before Kim sets up a meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump. With the new ICBM reportedly capable of hitting American soil, it could be to elevate the regime's position prior to any talks with the U.S. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Over in the Middle East, Israel is urging residents to leave Gaza City, signaling a major escalation of its ground offensive following its earlier targeting of high-rise buildings there. Park Hyo-bin has the latest.
Israel's army on Tuesday morning issued its first order for the full evacuation of Gaza City ahead of an expanded ground operation in the north. Israeli defense minister said 30 towers had been torn down so far, accusing Hamas of turning them into hubs of military activity. This comes after Israel leveled another high-rise in Gaza on Monday, part of its push to seize control of the city. Gaza's health ministry said 65 people have been killed and more than 300 wounded by Israeli fire over the past 24 hours. The Israeli military has been targeting prominent high-rise buildings for 4 consecutive days, saying Hamas installed surveillance infrastructure inside them. Israel and the U.S. are both pressing Hamas to release the hostages and agreed to a new ceasefire plan. The so-called Last Warning Initiative, unveiled by Trump's Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, outlines a negotiated end to the war with Israeli troops pulling out of Gaza once the hostages are freed and a ceasefire takes hold. Speaking in Hungary on Sunday, Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar confirmed Israel had accepted the U.S. proposal.
President Trump said it clearly yesterday. Israel said yes to his proposal. We are ready to accept a full deal that would end the war based on the cabinet decision.
Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu doubled down, demanding Hamas release all captives.
The war is also continuing in the Gaza Strip, where we will destroy Hamas, as we promised, and bring back our hostages, all of our hostages.
U.S. President Donald Trump also pressed Hamas, calling the situation a hell of a problem and urging the group to accept the deal.
I think we're going to have a deal on Gaza very soon. So they have hostages, but we have, let's say, 20 people, and we have about 38 bodies.
Trump also wrote on his Truth Social that everyone wants the hostages home and everyone wants this war to end. It is time for Hamas to accept. It remains unclear whether the ceasefire proposal will succeed. Netanyahu and Trump insist on hostage releases first, while Hamas demands a full ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli forces before freeing any captives. Park Hyubin, Arirang News.
And U.S. President Donald Trump has reiterated his remarks about deploying National Guard troops to Chicago to crack down on crime, but refrained from sharing a time frame. Remarks to this end have been relentless for about a month, and a new CBS News YouGov poll shows 6 out of 10 Americans oppose the idea of National Guard presence in their cities. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump's approval rating stood at 44%, up 2 percentage points from July. Back on the local front, Seoul is hosting an annual forum that seeks to share innovation strategies for future mobility, such as autonomous vehicles and flying taxis, all under an inclusive transport system. Our Moon Ji-young was there.
The future of transport and mobility is being shaped here in Seoul. The 3rd edition of the Global Mobility Conference opened on Tuesday, bringing together experts from around the world to discuss how to create more inclusive, resilient, safe, and accessible transport systems. This forum, co-hosted by the Korean government and the OECD International Transport Forum, aims to map out innovative solutions to redefine future on the move.
Mobility is almost a blood system of society and the economy, and we need to take good care of that system as we move forward. We need to take a global approach to regulating mobility, and in this sense, the leadership of the Republic of Korea is extremely important.
Looking into how we might travel in the future, automaker Hyundai Motor stressed the need to prepare for an era where mobility becomes an essential utility, much like electricity is today.
Transportation in the future will involve self-moving mobility devices centrally managed by the cloud. These devices will be interconnected, with cities serving as the infrastructure. We are developing them not merely as vehicles for transport, but as AI learning machines capable of continuously enhancing user value and improving device functionality.
The Korean Transport Ministry has highlighted the importance of bolstering policies to ensure mobility rights and inclusivity in the era of future mobility. The two-day conference also includes discussions on the commercialization of autonomous driving and urban air mobility, as well as addressing the mobility rights of disadvantaged groups. Global institutions saw today's conference as a meaningful opportunity to share innovation strategies for future mobility with the world and strengthen the foundation for global cooperation.
문지영, Arirang News.
On the entertainment front, K-pop Demon Hunters continues to make headlines both on screens and on music charts. Our Ian Jin revisits the global craze over this Netflix sensation.
K-pop Demon Hunters reached the top just 2 months after its release in June, and its phenomenon has posed the questions of how long and how far its success can go. It quickly became the most watched animated film on Netflix, and with more than 236 million views, has now become Netflix's most watched movie overall ever. Its main track, Golden, has topped both the UK and US pop charts. Now, this fever has carried over directly to Korea. At the National Museum of Korea, people are lining up early to buy souvenirs reminiscent of K-pop Demon Hunters, and real locations featured in the film are now tourist destinations for fans.
It's very beautiful. We heard a lot about it, very old, and it's from Korean, so yeah.
Government ministries have even joined in on the viral dance challenge based on the movie's choreography, showing that online enthusiasm remains high. The story is about embracing differences and finding peace within oneself and with others, which critics say may be a universal story, but resonates so widely largely due to the way the message was delivered. And the integration of distinctly Korean elements of K-pop and shamanism is also seen as a key contributor to the film's global appeal.
We tried to make the movie feel as Korean as possible. And one way to do that was to, in every scene and every design aspect, add in Korean elements.
What's notable is that K-pop has long faced skepticism for its global success as being just a passing trend. But now, K-pop fans in the US are showing a level of loyalty rivaling those in Korea. A survey released by Billboard showed that there is a growing base for strong K-pop fans, as more people listen to K-pop 7 days a week. With this, doubts surrounding the potential of Korean culture are finally starting to fade, leading to experts suggesting it is time to redefine the direction of the K-pop industry.
We need to recognize and share the universal values that K-pop holds with the world. It shouldn't be about just localizing or exporting management techniques.
Moreover, what's being called the KDH phenomenon, despite it being K-content technically produced abroad, now challenges Korea to truly tell its stories in a way that meets the heightened global standards. Ian Jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. In Europe, the French Parliament has toppled Prime Minister François Bayrou at a confidence vote over a contentious budget proposal after just 9 months in office. On Monday, the National Assembly voted overwhelmingly to reject Bayrou's government with 364 votes against and 194 for. The Prime Minister's resignation is expected to be submitted to President Macron on Tuesday. Bayrou had called the confidence vote himself, surprising even his own allies, as he sought approval for an austerity package aimed at reducing France's national debt, which now stands at 114% of GDP. This included the elimination of public holidays and a freeze on government spending. However, opposition parties from both the far left and far right united against the plan, rejecting it outright. This marks the second government collapse under President Emmanuel Macron's second term, who now faces naming a fifth new prime minister in 5 years or calling fresh elections. Moving over to Nepal, where amid protests against corruption and a social media ban, at least 19 people have been killed in clashes with security forces. Following the blocking of social media platforms last week, thousands of demonstrators marched to the parliament in Kathmandu on Monday, declaring this is a protest by the new generation of Nepal. Security forces responded with tear gas, rubber bullets, and even live fire, leading to at least 19 deaths, 17 in Kathmandu and 2 in Itahari. Over 100 people were injured, including police officers. In the aftermath, the Home Minister resigned, citing moral responsibility. The government blocked 26 social media platforms last week, including Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and YouTube, stating that these platforms failed to comply with registration requirements. Authorities claim the decision was to combat the spread of hate speech, fake news, and criminal activities by users with fake identities. However, young protesters viewed this as a form of censorship amid widespread perceptions of government corruption and economic stagnation. 2 platforms have been reactivated after registering with the ministry. In Mexico, a freight train hit a double-decker bus, killing at least 10 people and injuring dozens more. The collision on Monday in an industrial area of Atlacomulco, northwest of Mexico City, happened when the bus attempted to cross the train tracks ahead of a moving train. No crossing gates or warning signals were present. The bus company did not immediately respond to a request for comment. The local government said authorities are still working at the accident site and an investigation is underway. Finally, the Munich Motor Show kicked off on Monday. Europe's largest automotive expo, officially known as IAA Mobility 2025, is expected to attract over 500,000 visitors from more than 110 countries. This year's show features a record number of Chinese manufacturers, around 75 companies, challenging European brands. There's an emphasis on affordable electric vehicles, with BMW set to launch an electric SUV in early 2026. Mercedes' new electric GLC and Porsche's electric Cayenne were also in the spotlight. The motor show runs until September 14th. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Today, rain fell mainly in the south and Jeju Island. It will continue in the southern parts of the country until tomorrow morning. As for the amount of rainfall, more than 80 millimeters of heavy rain will be concentrated on Jeju Island, the south coast, and around Chirisan Mountain. About 5 to 60 millimeters of rain is forecast in other southern regions and 5 millimeters in Chungcheongnam-do province. With the rain, all of the heatwave warnings in the southern parts of the country have been lifted, and heatwave advisories remain only in some parts of Jeju Island. Today's daytime temperature were 1 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday in the southern parts of the country. Tomorrow morning will start cool at 20 degrees Celsius in Seoul, Gwangju, Daegu, and Gyeongju, 16 degrees in Chuncheon. Highs will move up to 32 degrees in Seoul, 29 degrees in Busan and Jeju. Rain in Jeju Island will continue until Friday, and it will rain all over the country again on Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us. Thank you for now.
We are a well-known company in the field of road safety facility manufacturing. We operate the factory nationwide in Korea. To go beyond the demanding safety standards of the ages, we are global network, local, worldwide, the global small and strong company appointed by Korean government. We are KSI.
We move. Annually, we invest more than 10% of our total revenues in research and development and 15% in the R&D workforce. Main products: pneumatic cylinders, solenoid valves, hydraulic cylinders, air preparation units, and grippers, and all other products are manufactured through systematic management. KCC Precision.
인식 시작합니다.
헤이 미러, 오늘의 운동 루틴 시작해줘.
네, 오늘의 운동 루틴을 시작하겠습니다. 레디, 고! 좀 더 앉아 보아요. 4, 3, 2, 1. 고생했어요.
While an understanding between Seoul and Washington has been reached to bring home the hundreds of South Korean workers detained by U.S. federal agents during a raid at the Hyundai plant in Georgia last week, the ripple effects of the event continue across the corporate arena and beyond. Hello and welcome to Tuesday's edition of Press Perspective. It's September 9th here in Seoul. I'm Min San-hee. Pundits have pointed to the optics of the recent raid by U.S. officials at the Hyundai plant in Georgia, affirming that it looks, quote, terrible and casts an uncertain light on future business ventures. For more on this, I have Stephen Borwick with Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, welcome back.
Thank you.
I also have Professor Kim Young-jin at Seogang University joining our session virtually. Professor Kim, it's good to have you on.
Good afternoon.
Right, Stephen.
Happy to be here.
Right, thank you for being here, Professor Kim. We will start with you. Stephen, let's begin with the ongoing response to the recent raid on the Hyundai plant in Georgia. What is the latest there?
In your intro, Sunny, you mentioned optics. I think that's a key part of it. And in yesterday and today, like reading the local reaction, I would just say that I've been in Korea for quite a long time, and like rarely have I seen something that seemed to get a kind of almost uniform reaction from across the political spectrum. Basically, everybody who's been following this seems to be pretty outraged by it. There's a few things that I would say. In the article that I wrote just yesterday about this, I quoted an editorial from the Joseon Ilbo newspaper that called this contradictory. And I think that's a key point because on one hand, you have the Trump administration very quite aggressively soliciting outside investments in the United States and basically telling Korean firms and firms from other countries, if you want to have access to the U.S. consumer market, if you want to sell products to American buyers, you are going to have to make those products in the United States. And these South Korean companies have complied. They've announced these very large investments. And as they are now trying to carry out those pledges, you have ICE carrying out this raid and, arresting the people that are on the ground trying to get these factories up and running. So I think this is spurring a few different emotions. Like one of them, I think, is just kind of befuddlement at the contradictory nature that I just laid out. It's just kind of confusion at like, is this just a case of different branches of the American government, like maybe having competing objectives and like the right hand not really knowing what the left hand is doing? I mean, did the authorities at ICE who authorized this raid, were they communicating with whatever the department of the government is that handles outside investment? Was there just like a lack of communication there, or ICE is up to a lot of very aggressive and very kind of theatrical things in the United States nowadays. Another thing I just think is, I think there's a sense of betrayal here in South Korea. There's just a sense that like the two countries have this decades-old alliance. They like to talk about how this is forged in blood. They like to talk about how it's ironclad. They like to have these regular meetings where they reaffirm their commitment to cooperation and all the rest. It's been a quite mutually beneficial relationship for a very long time. And then they see U.S. authorities not only carrying out this raid, but like another factor, like I said, you mentioned optics. Not only did they do this, but they quite deliberately took a video of it and they posted it online. And there's these images now on the internet of Korean engineers being shackled and led out of their workplace and put on a bus and being kind of treated as if they were criminals. Another thing that I think we can get into is like the specifics of what is required to work in the United States with proper authorization. If you read the Korean business press, as I've been doing over the past couple days, you will see that there's a kind of acknowledgement in the Korean corporate community that you just simply cannot have, every time you send someone on an overseas business trip, you don't always have time to get them like the exact visa. That takes a long time, and sometimes it's easier to just send somebody over as a tourist if all they're going to do is just be like attending a meeting or conducting a training session or something like that. It's not as though these people are going to the United States to like work for an American company and like earn local income. So, in business, there's a lot of things that you sacrifice, absolute fealty to every letter of the law because you need to get things done. And that's like a kind of open understanding in international business. And so it raises a lot of questions as to why the Trump administration, at this juncture of all times, when they have been telling Korean companies that they want them to come into the US, why they have decided to go ahead with this very, very specific and very aggressive form of enforcement. So there's a lot of questions here, and I think we'll be talking about this for a while.
All right, and a lot of the ideas you've just mentioned, the concerns that you've just shared, Stephen, are concerns shared by pundits here in the country. Professor Kim, what looks to be the broader impact of this latest development on trade ties between Seoul and Washington, do you think?
Well, as Steve well explained, I think, he's more than Korean in terms of explanation of the raid and the responses. So I heard it very well. Basically, before you get to the point, I'd like to explain a little bit of the fact about the factory building. So the battery factory development project of Hyundai Motors and LG Energy Solution has been known to be Korea's flagship investment project in the U.S. It is a $4.3 billion joint venture battery facility, among the largest project in Georgia, and expected to create 8,500 jobs. It was scheduled for completion later this year to supply battery cells to Hyundai Motors in a nearby electrical vehicle factory, Hyundai Motor Group, Meta Plant America LLC. The construction work on the site was suspended now, following the raid. The incident has drawn Korea's flagship, investment project in the U.S. into disarray. As a result, I guess that at least 22 other factory sites involving Korean business groups in automobile, shipbuilding, steel and electrical equipment, and semiconductor has been nearly halted. How will this, result affect Korea and U.S. trade relationship? I'm not quite sure, even though President Trump said our ally is still strong. I mean, there's no changes. But one thing which is very clear is that the speed of the investment will slow down. As the uncertainty of the business in the U.S. is increasing. It will absolutely affect the Korea-U.S. trade relationship in a negative way.
And that being said, then, Professor Kim, how do you see trade officials here in the country responding to this raid and its ripple effects?
Yeah, basically there are, two categories of responses. First one is about how to get the detained Korean, people to safely return to Korea. And, what the second is what we have to do in the future to prevent the raid, from happening again. The Korean officials said the goal is for all of these South Koreans to return home on a chartered flight. Unfortunately, South Korea announced Sunday and then today actually that the U.S. has agreed to release them, and then that it would bring them home on a charter flight once final administrative steps are completed. The second part is how to prevent a similar incident. The Korean officials mentioned that preventing reoccurrence will require close coordination with the U.S. and greater effort by companies to obtain the correct visas. Korean companies, doing business with the United States have expressed a great deal of frustration over the difficulties in obtaining proper visas for their employees, both before and during the current, Trump administration. This issue need to be resolved soon. Basically, Korean officials, and in the face, they don't say we are frustrated, we're angry. They don't say that, but they are deeply, frustrated, in front of this, incident. But they are prepared to proceed with the further relationship with the U.S. By solving those visa problems in the middle of the huge investment.
Right. And to address some of those problems, of course, or to address those problems, Foreign Minister Cho Hyun is currently in the U.S. Stephen, with regard to these ICE raids, quite a number of critics believe that such raids will serve to hurt America's manufacturing industry as a whole. What have you been hearing?
I can see this having a real chilling effect. I mean, just because we're already hearing some South Korean companies have already said that they're halting certain forms of business travel to the U.S., or some companies have instructed their employees who are already in the U.S. to kind of keep a low profile and to, maybe not report to their workplaces, like work from their accommodations if they can. I think the most basic part of the fallout from this is that this is inevitably going to mean that it takes longer for these factories to get up and running. I think the nature of the dispatch of a lot of the South Korean personnel who were there was, these are people from the Home Office who understand, how the machines in these factories work. They understand how these factories are laid out. They understand how this all goes together. Like, this is not something that you can hire a local person to do. You can't hire somebody who's never been in this kind of Korean factory to say, okay, well, you are in Georgia, you go to this construction site and you help them set it up. Like, that's just not feasible. So it is not as though these people are taking jobs that Americans could do. They do need to be there to get this operation up and running. And if the Trump administration's objective is really to have these factories up and functioning, then this is a kind of self-defeating measure. More long-term, like beyond like this particular case and beyond the kind of short term of like how this might affect U.S. manufacturing, I just wonder how it's going to affect further investments in the U.S. because among countries like South Korea and Japan, kind of U.S. allies, they've been quite compliant and they've been quite generous in going along with the Trump administration's demands, and they've kind of, even if, as Professor Kim alluded, even if like privately they are frustrated by this, publicly they have put on a brave face and they've gone along with all this. I wonder if they might, their patience might start to run out and there might be a shift, not just in corporate boardrooms, but in South Korean public opinion, where the conventional wisdom could change and the conventional wisdom could evolve to a point where enough people in the public and enough people in government and in business feel like maybe it is not wise to have generous and very large-scale investments in the U.S. under the current climate, because as we saw last week, these investments are not necessarily stable and they are not necessarily able to function as planned if you are going to have interference from various levels of the U.S. government. So time will only tell as to what the long-term effects of this will be. But I do think this might, a year or two from now, or 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, we might be looking back on this as a kind of turning point, because I cannot remember another case like this in the history of the alliance between South Korea and the U.S., where the South Koreans felt as though felt just kind of as put upon by this and as displeased with something like this. So it could have some real effects down the road.
Right. Keeping in mind what Stephen has just said, Professor Kim, you mentioned earlier about how foreign investment, the speed of foreign investment into the U.S. may slow down. What about the size of the investment? Do you suppose the raid on Hyundai looked to affect direct foreign investment into the U.S. from South Korea, as well as from America's other partners?
Well, absolutely, that's yes, right? What the market, the business do not like the most is uncertainty. President Trump has asked the Korean companies, to invest a substantial amount of money in the U.S., but he won't provide the incentives, infrastructures, and skilled labor. And rather, he is implementing top measures for immigration, so that the high-skilled employees cannot come into the U.S. Who want to invest in the U.S. in this situation, like, Steve mentioned, right? Even though companies decided to put money into the U.S. as planned, employees want to go to the U.S. In the face of that kind of risk of arrest. Considering the time to get proper visa, the construction schedule may be delayed to put more burden on the companies would invest in the U.S. So in the long term, U.S. might lose a lot of investment from its allies, not only from Korea, from Taiwan, Japan, and UK and EU. Whole bunch of countries might be concerned about this raid, and then the legal right to be in the U.S. as the worker. But they have very tight schedule to complete the factory, and then and they have to really rethink how to deal with how to proceed with this investment.
Right, quite a lot on their plate then. Moving forward, Stephen, but against this backdrop, Mr. Trump's sons, Eric and Donald Jr., they are going to be in South Korea this month to partake in cryptocurrency promotions, if you will. Eric is currently here to partake in a conference, cryptocurrency conference. What are your takeaways?
Well, the details are that Eric is here to take place in something called UpBitD conference, and Donald Jr. will be taking part in Korea Blockchain Week. I mean, as you said, Yusani, there's a promotional element to all this. I mean, the Trump family have really embraced crypto in all its complexity and all its commercial potential, as a kind of tool for making money in a way that's not immediately traceable, or doesn't have the most meticulous paper trail. I think it's right up their alley. So South Korea is in some ways a promising market for crypto. I think on a per capita basis, Korea has some of the one of the highest prevalences of people who are into crypto and into trading. So I think that's why they're here. I think it makes sense for them to want to come to Korea as a fairly big market, as a market that customarily has had quite positive feelings about the U.S. Maybe they're not arriving here at the most advantageous time. Maybe they'll face some questions as to what we've been talking about, but it should be easy for them to just present themselves as business people and say that they're not here as representatives of the U.S. government or representatives of the U.S. in any kind of holistic sense. They're just here to talk about the exciting opportunities that their coins provide.
Right. And Professor Kim, how do you explain the interest in the Korean crypto market from the Trump brothers?
Well, Korean crypto market is known to be one of the most active in its transaction and one of the largest in its volume of investment. When it comes to the Trump family, major Korean exchanges, including Upbit, Bitsum, and then CoinOne, have listed WLFI, and a governance token launched by World Liberty Financial, a decentralized finance project led by the Trump family. Trading opened at 10 p.m. Monday on Upbit and Bitsum, and followed by the CoinOne at 11 a.m. Tuesday. The project, stablecoin USD1, has also been listed on Upbit and Bitsum, with trading beginning at 4 p.m. Monday. Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump are listed as the co-founders and hold key executive role of the project, while President Trump hold the title of honorary co-founder, which cannot be possible in Korea anyway. With the largest listings across the world, the Trump family's cryptocurrency holdings are estimated to be worth around $5 billion US dollars, according to the Wall Street Journal. They own approximately 25% of the total WLFI token supply. So this is, they want to promote their token to Korean people.
Right. Stephen, as Professor Kim has alluded, the Trump family's crypto venture has been triggering conflict of interest concerns. What have you been hearing again?
I mean, conflict of interest seems almost like a quaint notion at this point. We haven't really seen much from the Trump family that signals that that's something that they're all that concerned about, like the perception that the Trump family or even Trump himself are using political office for personal financial gain. There's something that they're pretty open about. I mean, the way that we're talking about conflict of interest in this instance kind of reminds me of when I was young, the idea of selling out. If you were a public figure or if you were a creative person or an artist of some time, that you had this kind of responsibility to guard your integrity and not sell out, not do things just for money, not work with the corporate side of your field. But that's not something that anybody talks about anymore. I mean, I think anybody who's younger than 30 is unfamiliar with that concept, and they just see it as natural that a creative person or a public figure would do everything they can to maximize their personal value, to make as much money as they can, to have as big of a public profile as they can. And I think a kind of similar dynamic is at work here. I think Americans are kind of getting, because of the Trump era, Americans are kind of getting used to the concept that a public figure would, specifically the president, a politician, somebody who's on paper supposed to be a civil servant, that this person would have business interests and that this person, while in office, would be, looking to maximize their brand and maximize their interests, and all the ways that previously just corporate language have infiltrated all areas of life. We now talk about public servants in the way that we would talk about entrepreneurs or entertainers or any kind of other people. But I think time will really tell just how much norms have changed when we get to the next administration. I mean, will the next American president want to, whoever that is, will want to enact a kind of return to the way that things used to work, the kind of more quaint norms of old American public life when people cared more about things like conflict of interest? But we'll see. I don't think that, I will just say that while the Trump sons are here, I don't think that they will be losing any sleep over the possibility that they are involved in some kind of conflict of interest.
Right. I feel like we'll be talking about this again in another session. According to the foreign media, President Trump is hoping to host next year's G20 summit at one of his hotels.
Oh, wow.
Professor Kim, how is Mr. Trump impacting the crypto market, and what should South Korea keep an eye on, very briefly speaking?
Well, that's quite interesting development, right? Like I mentioned, in Korea, a lot of lawmakers were charged, and investigated due to they have, cryptos. Anyway, it's a totally different conditions. There are two venues, Trump family influence the crypto market. One is meme coin the family issued. it has been, well traded in the crypto market to give, fortune to the Trump family. The other is the stable coin for which, Federal Reserve Board, the central bank of the U.S. is prohibited to issue by the law of anti-CBDC Act. Korean government need to keep its eye on the outflow of Korean capital to the U.S. and the monopolistic power of the U.S. dollar-based stable coin. In the meantime, Korean government need to seriously consider how to create value of digital assets to provide investment opportunities to Korean people and foreign investors, so that we as a country, right, Korea, can get the capital inflow into Korea. Moreover, Korean government need to consider how to build the crypto ecosystem, including Korean won-based stable coin, to compete with the U.S. stable coins. It won't be a rosy road to gain the competitiveness in the crypto market, but we, as a sovereign country, need to do something about it. Because every asset will become digital in the future, and the competitive advantage in the digital world will be critical in the future for the further economic success.
Right, I see. And on that note, Professor Kim, I'll have to end it today. As always, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
My pleasure to be here.
And Stephen, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have today. We return with more panel discussion, same time tomorrow. Do join us then.
천년을 이어온 우리의 지혜가 제천에서 다시 태어났어. 세대를 관통한 선조들의 건강 비